So this next video lecture is, we are now in module 15. So this is entitled Basic Computer Concepts. So basically, the auditor needs to have a basic understanding about computer concepts, especially that in the next module or chapter, we will be discussing about auditing in ACIS environment. So here, the auditor should have at least understand the basic concepts. Okay, so before he can perform the appropriate audit procedures. Okay, in auditing certain items and other areas as well. Okay, for the overview of this module, so we will be discussing about the basic concepts in computer. So this will be the foundation in learning about the audit in a computer information system or CIS environment of the client. Okay, so for the learning outcomes, so you will be able to understand the basic concepts of or in computer. So I know that you also have your computer subject, which these concepts are also discussed. So I know that you are familiar with this already. For the contents, we will be discussing about data, hardware, software, network, and the internet. Okay, so to start with, let us discuss about data. Okay, so data, this is a representation of facts, concepts, or instructions in a formalized manner. So this should be suitable for communication, interpretation, or processing by human or through electronic machine. So basically, these are uh, the um, the concepts, okay, or instructions that needs to be processed before it can become uh, understandable or it can be interpreted. Okay, so basically in accounting, there are data which are gathered and then processed and then later on becomes or the outcome of this are the reports, okay, which will be used by the management. And on the part of the audit, of course, this will be used for gathering the evidences. Okay, so the data, normally this is represented with the help of the characters such as the alphabets, digits, or special characters. So you're familiar with this already. Okay, so what about information? So when we say information, these are organized or classified data already. So this has some meaningful values for the receiver. So meaning the data were already processed, okay, and organized so that it becomes meaningful and able to be interpreted, okay, by the user. So information, this is the process data, okay, so which the decisions and actions are made or based. So for the decision to be meaningful, the processed data must qualify the following characteristics. So this must be timely, meaning the information is available when this is needed or required. Okay. Next, it must be accurate. So meaning the information should be representing something that is factual and correct. Okay, so that the decisions will be made and based on valid um, information, okay, so that it becomes useful, okay, and meaningful. Another characteristic is it must be complete, okay, so everything that needs to be considered are included, especially that this will be used for decision making and as well as for gathering the audit evidences. Okay, so we have here the illustration for the data processing cycle. So you are already familiar with this. This is the basic um, uh, processing cycle, okay, of the data. So we have the input. Okay, so normally this where the data are collected, and then in the processing stage, this is where the data are being classified and organized, and then the output now will be maybe in the form of a report, okay, and other documents which are uh, useful, okay, for decision making by the users and for gathering audit evidences by the auditor. Okay, for the input, so basically this is where the data is prepared, okay, in some convenient form for processing, meaning there is collection of data that later on it will be transformed or processed into a meaningful report or output. So the form will depend on the processing machine, okay. So it may be collected electronically, manually, or in other means. Okay, for example, when electronic computers are used, so the input data can be recorded um, in any of the several types of input medium, such as the magnetic disk, tapes, and others. Okay, so what about processing? Okay, so this is the step in which the input are changed or these are organized to produce uh, the data in a more useful form. Okay, so for example, paychecks can be calculated from the time cards, or a summary of sales for the month can be calculated from the sales order. So in this case, I mean, calculating is the process. Okay, uh, in which the output here is the paycheck. So the time cards are used as the input. Okay, or the summary of sales for the month are the output, and here the process is calculating also, and the sales order is the input, okay, used. So what about the output? So this is the result of the preceding processing step, okay, where the data are collected and processed. So the particular form of the output data depends on the use of the data. Okay, so for example, output may be paychecks for employees, as we mentioned, okay, in the previous slide as an example. Okay, output can also be in the form of reports, financial statements, and other documents which are useful for decision making. Okay, so data processing. Okay, so this is, or we will discuss what data processing is, although we have mentioned this in the cycle already, but in the module that we based the contents from, so it focus also on the discussions about data processing. Okay, so this is very important because in audit, the auditor should know how the data was processed, okay, for the auditor to determine if that has undergone a proper procedure, authorization, and others. Okay, to ensure that it is free from material misstatement, whether due to fraud or error. So normally data processing, this is the conversion of data into usable and desired form. Okay, so as mentioned earlier in the data processing cycle. So this conversion or processing, this is carried out using a predefined sequence of operations, either manually or automatically. So meaning there is a proper stage or a protocol that is being used by the entity on how they process the data, okay, and transform it into a meaningful and usable form. So most of the processing is done using computers nowadays, and thus this is done automatically. So the output or the processed data, so this can be obtained in different forms. Okay, for example, these forms may include image, graphs, table, vector file, audio, charts, or any other desired format. But in accounting, normally it is in the form of financial statements and financial reports. Okay, so the form obtained depends on the software or the method of the data processing that the entity is using. Okay, when it is done itself, it is referred to as automatic data processing, meaning these are the transactions that were uh, gathered or executed in an online platform where a single click can do the transformation of the data into usable form already in a matter of seconds, okay, using softwares that is available. Okay, so that is for the data processing. What about methods of processing? So we have different types of data processing. So the first and the most common is manual processing. So this method of data processing is processed, of course, manually without the use of a machine, tool, or electronic device. Okay, so basically in your training in accounting using the 10 columns, okay, in preparing the financial statements, that is manual manner of processing financial data into financial reports or statements. Okay, so data under this a method is processed manually and all the calculations, logical operations are performed manually. So we use the calculator, okay, and pen and paper to to process the data. The second method is mechanical processing. Okay, so this is done by the use of a mechanical device or a very simple electronic device. So actually, manual is there is no calculator. Okay, technically. So in our case, manual, and we mixed it with mechanical processing because we use the calculator. Okay, so again, when using calculator and typewriters or other simple electronic device, this is already considered to be mechanical processing. In manual, there is no device that is being used. It's manual solving in a piece of paper. Okay, so that's how it is processed before. Okay, the devices and computers were available. Okay, so in mechanical processing also, when the need for processing is simple, this method can be adopted. And the third is electronic processing. So this is the modern technique in processing the data. So we have the EDP or electronic data processing. So this is the fastest and the best available method with the highest reliability and accuracy. Because in this case, the entity may use a software or program that is already prepared for and programmed, okay, to, for example, prepare summary reports or financial statements. So the problem here will only be on the input, okay, that is uh, entered into the system. So that's where the auditor should determine whether these inputs are reliable and accurate because the processing are now programmed and standardized already. Okay, so in electronic processing also, the technology used is the latest, as this method uses computers as well as the employ or these are employed, I mean, in most of the agencies nowadays, okay, for efficiency and accuracy. So the use of softwares forms integral part of this type of data processing. So the data is processed through a computer, and the data and set of instructions are also given, as mentioned, in the computer as input. And then the computer or the software or the program will automatically process the data according to the given set of instructions. Okay, so that's how efficient is, okay, the data processing is under electronic processing method. And lastly, the computer is also known as the electronic data processing machines. This is now are used, okay, in processing the data, may it be qualitative or quantitative form. Okay, so those are for the discussions for data.